Hey there, Alex Kidman here. Today taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. So this is the new flagship phone for 2024 from Samsung. And look, Samsung's Galaxy S line has been its reliable flagship brand for many years. And if you look at the phones that Australians, and I typically deal with the Australian market, if you look at the phones that Australians buy in any quantity, it tends to cut between Apple and Samsung and everyone else trailing behind. So these flagship phones are important in terms of showing what phones can do in a given year. Coming up with something new beyond your kind of expected upgrades, faster processors and the like, is a daunting task, especially when you're talking about the Ultra model of the Galaxy S family, because that's the king of the hill. That's the best of the best, or at least that's what Samsung wants you to think. That's Samsung's position. This is the best phone that we can make right now, till next year at least. And look, there's definitely an argument to be had about the relative value of premium phones, given that Galaxy S24 Ultra pricing starts north of $2,000 here in Australia. And that's a lot of money, so the S24 Ultra really has to deliver a lot of value. Quick spoiler, it generally does. This is a seriously impressive smartphone, and one that actually impressed me more than I expected. So look, in design terms, Samsung hasn't radically reinvented things here. I think the time when we saw brand new wacky phone designs in these non-folding phones are probably behind us. The biggest change is in the front display, which is no longer curved, it's flat. And that's a taste matter to me, but I know a lot of people did not like a curved screen. This is now purely flat. It's a big screen too, 6.8 inches. And look, every time I pull the S24 Ultra out of my pocket, I kind of feel like I'm pulling out a very small Samsung TV. And I mean that as a compliment, because the screen is really good under any conditions. Low light, direct sunlight, in my office, out and about. I've just not had a problem with this screen at all. It's been glorious the whole way through. It's really good, really, really nice. And the only thing that sort of spoils it for me, and I wonder what Samsung's doing here really, is the inclusion of the selfie camera. Now, it's not that it shouldn't have a selfie camera, it's more that the Fold line of phones have had in-display selfie cameras for a couple of years now. Admittedly, low megapixel count ones, but they've been in the display. This doesn't have that, and presumably Samsung just can't get the megapixel count up, can't get the quality good enough to put that in there. So you've got a little hole punch in the screen, but otherwise, screen is glorious. If I've got one criticism of the flat design, it's that it leads to the phone having these pointy little corners. And I really do feel that when I'm pulling it out of my pocket. It's kind of, it's not like cutting sharp, but there's an edge to it. And it's quite noticeable. Now, I'm the kind of guy that would throw a phone case onto this device no matter what, because I like the protection of phone cases. In this situation, though, I feel like a phone case is a really sensible move just because it would get past that pointy problem. So Samsung sells the Galaxy S24 Ultra in a variety of titanium finishes. Certainly not first to the market there. You've got your choice of titanium grey, black, violet, yellow, blue, green or orange, with 3 colours here in Australia, exclusive to Samsung, and all the rest available basically everywhere. Samsung's loaned me the titanium grey model. It's probably not what I would have personally chosen. I probably would have gone for the blue, but look, it's a nice professional looking colour. It looks good. It feels pretty good in the hand, although quite large and a little bit pointy, as I said. It's kind of nice though, at this flagship end, to see so many colours in play, because a lot of flagships still only come with 2 or 3 kind of businessy colours. This one feels like it's got a bit more of a sense of fun to it, and that's a good thing. Control-wise, you've got standard volume and power buttons on the side, and then at the base you've got USB-C for power and a standard dual SIM card slot. No microSD expansion, however, which is a little bit regrettable, but it's been the case for a while now. And of course, the S Pen. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on the S Pen, basically because it feels to me like Samsung hasn't dwelled too much on the S Pen. There's not that many new features which are exclusive to the S Pen. If you like the S Pen, great, it's here. If you don't, you can kind of ignore it. It's just built in anyway. I'm not a big S Pen user myself. It works fine, but it works very much the same as it did in prior years in my testing. Flip the Galaxy S24 over and you'll see lenses, a lot of lenses, with 5 tiny little eyes staring back at you, begging you to engage in some creative photographic work. Specifically, it's headed up with a 200 megapixel wide sensor, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and then dual telephoto 10 and 50 megapixel sensors. And at the front, you've got that 12 megapixel sensor hiding beneath the hole punch. And look, as always, the photographic prowess of a camera is far more than the sum of its megapixels. Although, it's kind of interesting to note that Samsung's opted for a drop in absolute telephoto zoom from 10 times, which is on the S23 Ultra, to 5 times on the S24 Ultra. You still get that same space zoom up to 100 times that you did with prior models, but it's handled a little differently. Of course, the trade-off there is you've got a 50 megapixel sensor rather than a much smaller sensor on the S23 Ultra. So, how does that actually play out with distant targets? Well, look, here's a sample shot I took of a sulfur-crested cockatoo, which happened to dive bomb me, and I thought, well, I'm going to take a photo of you by way of revenge. It's not much of a revenge, but you've got to take what you can get, don't you? Here's the ultra-wide shot where it's pretty much just visible, and then if we punch it up to 3 times zoom, it's a lot more visible. It's a reasonable enough way to say, hey, yeah, there's a bird up there. 5 times, still solid, not my best photo. This is just an example. I'm not really trying to show, hey, I took a great photo here. At 10 times zoom, we get a bit more detail on the bird. It's looking pretty good. And 30 times zoom works well. And look, in prior years, I've generally found 30 times is about as far as you want to push Samsung space zoom. Beyond that, you lose quality pretty quickly. And this is still impressive to see on what is a mobile phone. But of course, you want to see what it looks like at 100 times, don't you? Well, prepare yourself. Yeah, that's not a good looking photo. I mean, it's kind of funny because he squawked at me as I was taking his photo, but it's not a good shot. And that's very much the story for 100 times. Even with a tripod, it's not great. It's okay at looking at things that are very far away, but it's not good at getting good photographic representations of them. General output from the S24 Ultra's cameras, though, are pretty good. I mean, I'm generally very, very happy with the everyday photos that I was able to take from it. I'll throw a few of those up right now so you can skim through them quickly. I've got more in my full text review, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But of course, the other area where these phones really need to push it is in low light. And to test that, I grabbed the S24 Ultra, I grabbed an Apple iPhone 15 Pro, and I grabbed a Google Pixel 8 Pro, and went out to do some low light shooting. And just in case anyone thinks that this tech journalism thing is all glamour and fun, this was going out shooting late one night with a bunch of phones in the rain. Not a whole lot of fun. But what kind of results did I get? Well, my first stop was a local sports field, which I've used for years and years and years now as a sample low-light testing space. And look, here the S24 Ultra compared very, very well. The iPhone tended to get a slightly more colourful shot, the Pixel was a little bit more muted, and the S24 Ultra sat somewhere in between. But a decent shot nonetheless. It was much the same story with a long-distance shot, showing the clubhouse near that field. The iPhone, again, I think shot slightly brighter, slightly better colours, but the S24 Ultra is right up there. Quite nice. Some of this, of course, comes down to the aesthetics that you want out of a shot as well. And I will state that these are just handheld shots. There's no tripods. There's no post-production involved in any of these. These are just photos like a regular consumer would take them, because that's very much the point here. Grabbing selfies got interesting. Here, the S24 Ultra absolutely outshot the iPhone and the Pixel, which just washed me out. Now, it's sort of cheating a bit because this is in portrait mode, and both the Pixel and the S24 Ultra will show up a bright circle of light to illuminate your face before taking the shot. In portrait mode, the iPhone doesn't do that, but it does do it if you take a regular selfie in photo mode, and that's a better shot. Still, the S24 Ultra did really, really well here. It's a good low-light performer, no question. But of course, Samsung wants to take it a little bit further, because one of the big selling points for the S24 Ultra this year is Galaxy AI. This is this suite of AI features they've built into the phone, and for the camera, that's the photo editor. And this lets you do things which are, well, they're kind of reminiscent of what Google's done with Magic Editor on the Pixel 8 Pro. You can remove subjects from a shot, or you can move them around kind of Photoshop style, but on the phone. Now, a couple of caveats here. The actual processing is kind of slow, and ideally Samsung wants you actually to do it on their servers. That is, uploading the picture to their servers, doing the edits there, sending it back down. Undoubtedly, that's why it's slower. You can opt to not do that, to keep all the data on your device, although you still have to have a data connection live for it to even let you do this. You also have to enable it within its AI settings. But what are the results like? Well, yeah, look, they're not great. So, for example, let's take this guy on an escalator. Let's say I don't want him on the escalator anymore. So I run it through the photo editor, and this is the result I get. Now, it's even weirder if I run it through the photo editor and I tell it I don't want it to upload the data, because then it looks like he's fallen into some kind of alternate dimension. That looks really painful. It's not a good result. I do have to say, though, this is very similar to what I see from Magic Editor. This is AI, and it's something that may get better over time, but certainly at launch, it's not quite everything that the hype might make you think that it is. You undoubtedly, with a bit of Photoshop prowess, you could get better results. For some simple shots, it's okay, but it's certainly not a reason why I'd buy the S24 Ultra. However, I would buy the S24 Ultra just generally for its cameras. They're really good. They're really flexible. You've got everything from your ultra wides to quite a long zoom. Low light is good. Macro is good. It all just works really, really nicely. It's a really well put together package and highly competitive in that flagship space. So what about performance? The S24 Ultra is built around Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor, but there's an important qualification to make here. That's the processor that's the heart of every S24 Ultra, but here in Australia, not the other members of the S24 family. They're using the Exynos 2400 silicon instead. Typically, and I've not been able to test that because Samsung won't loan me the devices and let me benchmark them, but typically those run a little slower. You sometimes get better battery life out of them, but it's worth knowing, I think, that not all the S24 family have the higher end Snapdragon processor in them. Only the S24 Ultra. For some years now, there's been a race between Apple and basically Qualcomm, to a certain extent MediaTek, in terms of processor speeds and feeds and so on. Apple's generally been winning that handily. Putting the S24 Ultra through those same benchmarks, though, show it catching up really well for CPU performance, and in fact overtaking by a fair margin in GPU performance. Short form of this, and if you like benchmarks, they're in my full review, link in the description below, is that this is a really, really powerful phone. Although I will say, while its GPU is unparalleled in terms of benchmark performance, in Android, there's just not so much that really pushes that just yet. We're seeing lots of AAA games come to the iPhone, and there just doesn't feel like there's an equivalent there for Android. Run high-end Android games against this all you like, and they will run beautifully, and even lower-end stuff. I do like me a bit of pinball from time to time, for example. Runs beautifully. There's basically nothing you can throw at this phone that it can't run, but I feel like there should be. I want better gaming experiences. I don't know if that's down to Samsung to push, or Google to push, or the devs to push, but it'd be nice to see something that really pushed this hardware, that really made that investment in better processors, better GPUs, feel more worth it. Speaking of feeling worth it, it's a 5G phone, but here in Australia, it's still only a sub-6 phone, not millimeter wave. That irks me because Google's gone for millimeter wave and sub-6 on the Pixel 8 Pro. It's the only one here in Australia. It's the only one giving you access to that faster tier of 5G, where you can get it. Yes, there are coverage issues, but still, for such a flagship phone, it feels like a big miss to me that it's not millimeter wave compatible. I wish Samsung had gotten onto this. Hopefully Apple will by the end of the year, which I think would give Samsung the necessary kick to do that next year. But maybe I'm the only one who cares about that kind of 5G ephemera. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. One feature that I really do like included with the S24 Ultra is 7 years of OS upgrades and security updates. Now that's matching the Pixel 8 Pro, and it's great to see. It means this will go from Android 14 through to Android 21, I suppose, if they call it Android 21 by then. 7 years is great because it means you've got a really long lifespan of updates, and I suppose that might make more sense out of this being a more powerful phone, because over time we'll see more and more powerful phones. This should still be able to keep up and be a solid competitor over that 7-year span. Good to see, and I really wish more manufacturers got on board with delivering phones with longer OS and security upgrade promises. Then, of course, we circle back to Galaxy AI because that's the big selling point for this phone. And again, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I should point out, by the way, that most of the Galaxy AI features are disabled by default. You've actually got to go into a menu and enable them if you want them to work. You won't find some big Galaxy AI suite or app sitting there waiting for you when you get the S24 Ultra. Instead, you'll see the same kind of button pop up in things like the photo editor for camera or on the Samsung internet browser for the summarize feature, that kind of thing. It'll become a familiar button, but it's across a whole slew of services. Now, of all the new AI features, easily my favorite is circle to search. So this is a really, really simple thing. You can use the S Pen or your finger. You just do a long press on the home button or a long press on the little navigation slider if you're using gestures, then circle anything on screen and it'll do a Google image search on it. It's simple, it mostly works, and it doesn't jump you out of the app that you're actually using just to find the thing that you needed to know about. Now, I say mostly works because some of the Google search results I've got from it have been a little bit janky, but I can't blame Samsung for that. Basically, I blame people who do SEO because the reason that they're janky is because search is such a competitive field these days. And, if that improves, then circle to search will improve, but the actual functionality is really slick, really nice. The other problem there, of course, is if you've got a Pixel 8 Pro or Pixel 8 right now, then it's already got this feature, and it feels kind of likely that we might see it down the track in other phones, so it's not exactly a unique feature, even if the S24 Ultra technically had it first. Then there's the summarizing function. Now, this works only with Samsung's own internet browser. If you don't want to use Samsung's internet browser, you don't get the summarize function. And what this does is this will provide you with a quick summary of a given web page. So, for example, I threw my review of EV car hire service UFO Drive at it, and this is the summary it gave me. Now, that's not a terrible summary. I did basically say those things, but it leaves off a lot of detail, and some of its summary isn't 100% exactly what I said. It's really worth reading that review, by the way, if you're keen on hiring an EV, but I sort of digress there, except to say, don't trust the summary function to tell you everything you need to know about a given web page or piece of text. It's still probably worth your while reading that piece of text because in summarizing, it's going to miss some details. Translate works about as well as Google Translate, and it's almost certainly built on the same hardware for shorter conversations, whether they're phone conversations or whether you're just doing a text or voice recorded conversation. It'll get the basic details mostly right. You probably won't drive off a bridge or things like that. For more complex grammar, though, it can quickly get really weird, get things wrong. It's not perfect. It's definitely just mechanical translation, and there's still a fair bit of work that needs to be done here. What about battery life? So the Galaxy S24 Ultra is a bigger phone with a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, but that's not a bigger battery. 5,000 milliamp hours, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, is the standard for any non-folding Android phone these days. The ones that don't have 5,000 milliamp hour batteries, those are the weirdos, really. And I was really curious to see how well this would perform because typically, as I said, the Snapdragon version of a given Galaxy S phone has tended to have slightly worse battery life but better performance. It's got a big, bright screen capable of 120 Hz, oodles of power, but how well would it actually work with that? Well, the answer is really, really well. So running it through a standard 1-hour YouTube battery test, this is the test that I run all the time across lots of devices, it absolutely aced it. Full results again on my website. Even day to day, easily getting through a working day. Now, like any phone, if you want to game all day on this thing, if you want to shoot 8K video for hours at a time, yes, you'll run it flat. But for everyday use, yeah, this is going to make it into one day. 2 days is entirely feasible if you're a light user, although if you're a really light user, I think the S24 Ultra might be overkill, but hey, it's up to you. It'll certainly last the distance is the point I'm trying to make here. Now, you will have to bring your own charger to it because Samsung doesn't provide those. It does also support wireless charging. A little bit disappointing not to see Qi 2 in play, but it'll do either and do either reasonably quickly, not quite up to the speed of some competing Chinese brands, but then that may well have an impact on overall long-term battery life anyway. Basically, this is a really good battery performer, which goes nicely with the fact that it's also got really good cameras, really good performance, and really good design. And look, honestly, on paper, when the S24 Ultra was announced, I kind of thought, oh yeah, look, that looks like it's a decent phone, but it also felt to me like Samsung might be coasting a bit. They might just be going, yeah, all right, look, let's just make a faster phone. And that's not what they've done. They've made a much, much better phone in most respects. It's easily the best Android flagship phone money can buy right now. Superb performance, nicely capable and fun cameras, great display. The S Pen is there if you want it, and you can ignore it if you don't. It's all really rather good. Now, Galaxy AI doesn't quite live up to the hype that Samsung wants to give it, in my view. Now, with that 7-year promise of OS upgrades, though, AI's got a lot of time to move and a lot of time to get better. So maybe a couple of years down the track, Galaxy AI might be fantastic. At launch, it's not. It's not the reason why I'd buy this phone. But if you want a really good, powerful flagship phone and you can meet the asking price, this is highly recommended. It's a great phone.